Carolyn Clark's honor.
Yes, thank you very much for that acknowledgement. If there's anyone on this meeting who would like to say a few words, please go ahead.
Alexia, you worked with her for a number of years. Please feel free.
Thank you, Superintendent Wells. I would like to send my condolences to the Clark family, a longtime Albany family. Caroline Clark was an Albany student. She raised her daughter Jessica in Albany. I first met her in 1993 when she was a special education paraprofessional working at Albany Middle School. And she learned her way and rose through the ranks to become a sixth grade teacher. I believe she'd been a sixth grade teacher at the middle school for well over 10 years. So again, my condolences to the Clark family.
Thank you very much. I also extend the board's condolences to the family and our heart goes out to all of the people who knew Miss Clark and loved her. This is a difficult time now, even more difficult because of this tragedy. So, thank you very much. Well, we will move on to the approval of this agenda for the emergency meeting. This agenda has only one item, review and discussion. May I have a motion?
I move we approve the agenda.
I second.
We'll have a roll call for voting on the agenda approval. Ms. Shin, could you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, this will start with Vice President Duran,
Yes.
President Trutain.
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I missed the student board member. Student board member Mala.
Yes.
Student board member Weinstein.
Here. Yes.
Okay. Trustee Hinckley,
Yes.
Trustee Doss,
Yes.
and Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The agenda was approved unanimously. And that brings us to our item number 4, review and discussion. 4-1, report on the governor's May budget revision and implications for AUSD. Dr. Wells, I'm going to turn this over to you and your staff for this presentation.
Thank you, President Trutain. Tonight, we're going to spend some time addressing the budget announcement made last week by our Governor, Gavin Newsom. And the budget that he announced, the long and short of it is that is very bleak. Although some in the education community, or I might say many, think in the final analysis that we may get some assistance from Washington, but as of yet, we have none. And so it's prudent for us and many others throughout the state and the country to let you know what the current the budget announcement means to our district. And so we wanted to provide as soon as possible the implications of that budget rollout and to entertain and answer any questions that the board may have to make sure that we as a unit are fully informed about the budget and its implication and potential immediately future decisions we may have to make in order to keep our district afloat. The last time we had to deal with budget crisis of this proportion, or at least close to it, was back in, I believe, 2009. And in 2009, after doing some research, I've learned that Albany had to make some immediate decisions in order to stay afloat at that time. And as you will hear tonight, you get to hear at least a comparison of where we are today versus, I believe, where we were in 2009. So at this time, I'd like to turn this presentation over to our CBO, Jackie Kim.
Jackie, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. There. Did you not hear anything, right? Okay, our start over. So good evening for trustees and present to retain. This is the update on 2020 May revision workshop, and I will share where we are in our budget-wise, and I will also go over our, what this means to Albany. Okay, and I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. See, so let's go to the first page. As the former governor, Jerry Brown, always warned us that recession was coming, but then he didn't even foresee this pandemic. So this COVID-19 pandemic has shut down our economies across the world. So when you see this GDP, in 2008-9, when we had a great recession, it was about negative 8.4% decrease. But now they are projecting up to 42.8%. So this is a lot bigger hit to our economy and to the district, to school district in all over United States. So the next one. So this May revision for the statewide, this is very unusual year for everyone. But the May revision is still the last step in the state budget process before they adopt their state budget spending by June 15th. So until then, this is the best budget information we have. And also we are expecting August revision, sometime in August, of course, and district got to revise another budget in September. Okay. So why are we here? So the big three taxes for the state make up about 77% of the state general fund revenue. They are personal income tax, corporation tax, and sales and use tax. But both federal and state governors shifted the annual tax deadline from April 15th to July 15th. Then now we are looking for significant decline in tax revenues at this time. And also there are high unemployment figures that we might not fully recover these lost revenues. So you can see 22% 9, and this is a lot of drops when we compare in this few years. Okay. So this California revenue, the May revision assumed that the state will have 41.2 billion loss in revenues compared to 1920 and 2021 over 2 years. So that it's for both years. So the revenue loss are compounded. So the shortfall will be about 54 billion in California. So, and please stop me if you have any questions when I go through this slide, because I know this is more of state budget and I will have to apply to our district budget. So it's gonna be some gaps there. And also I like to make sure that if we have a full understanding going through our economies, state economies, and what it affects to district economies.
I do have a quick question.
Sorry, Brian, sorry, let me just, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just had one question. The 9.1 billion for 1920, is that's like an average, and then because of everything that happened, the 32.2 is the anomaly based because of the COVID-19. But is it usually 9.1 or around that? Is that like an average?
Oh, so this is the so this is January 2020. And then we are expecting that it's going to be a bigger loss in 2021. So we are in here 9.1 billion because of the COVID-19, but then we are expecting bigger loss in 2021.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Right. So we are still in the first line item here, 9.1 billion.
Got it.
Excuse me, Jackie. I would like to ask for a further clarification. When it says a minus 9.1 billion loss
Mhm.
in revenues, is that based on a loss versus what was projected? Or is that based on a loss versus some sort of average expected revenue?
So this is what I believe is the first, the projected revenue loss. Because we don't know if, because 1920 is not done yet, right? We still have until June 30th to have this 1920 revenue. And also again, 2021 is not yet here yet. So it's the projected revenue loss. It's all projections at this point.
Thank you.
So next slide, Prop 98 funding. So as you can see, we are here in 1920. So governor's January budget had 81.6 billion. Now it's going to be about 77.4 billion. It's going to be a big drop there. So this funding level has decreased significantly, and this maybe is an estimate about minimum guarantee will decline about 23% over 3 years. So 1920 and the other 2 years is going to be dropping about 23%. So that's the projection that they have. The next 30. So what does this mean to Albany, right? Or to school district? This is more of the education funding now. So when we were getting about, let's see, let me just go back, sorry. So we were gonna get about 2.29 COLA, which was 2.31 COLA that the governor announced. But now they suspend that 2.31 COLA, and on top of that, they have total cut of 10%. So we are getting not only negative of minus 2.31, but we are also, the total cut will be about 10%. So what it means is those two together, so not having 2.31 COLA and another about 7.92 negative will make up about 10% reduction to our total funding from the state. We get about 32 million for this LCF funding. So it's going to be pretty much 3.2 million to us. So that's really the 10% of our state budget that we are gonna get less this coming year.
Can I ask a question that
Sure.
you may be coming to? So there was also a projected COLA for the following year. Has his budget said anything about the following year?
Right. So yes, I can actually maybe briefly go over that here. So this is what we have received this morning. Same 0%, meaning this was what we were gonna get in January when the governor had a proposal budget, but now it will be negative 7.92, and it's going to be continued to be at the same funding level for next 2 years. So what we are getting for 2021 will be the same funding level for 21, 22, and 22, 23.
So it'll go down by 10% and then stay there for at least 2 years.
Right, that is correct. So that's what he has at this point.
Jackie,
Yes.
if I can ask a question, for the COLA or in other things like LCFF, will that change if we get federal government assistance?
So that's two things here. So the federal government assistance can be in two different ways. One is FEMA, it will come to us regardless of this LCFF funding from the state, meaning we don't know how much, but I know we submit the application and we hope to get something from FEMA, which is the federal fund, right? So that is one. The other one is if the states is be able to get any assistance from federal, that means he get to modify his budget sometime in August. That means he get to also modify this funding for us. So there are two things that we are expecting from the federal. One is the first one, direct funding to us, and the other one is hopefully state receive the funding from federal, and they the state can get to adjust this COLA, and and we will have more funding hopefully in August. So there is a hope, right? Did I answer your question, Clementina?
Yes, thank you.
So this 10% reduction means about 800 to 954 per ADA. Okay. And also this lowers the supplemental and the concentration grant by 10% as well. Okay, and not only the LCFF funding level was cut, also the categorical programs, which are restricted money, are also reduced. And you can see a lot of other programs here. We don't have adult education, but we do have, for example, career tech education. And here are all these cuts that he is also making to balance the budget for him, or to save any cash for him to contribute to other fundings. But that only, we have a bad news. There's just some good news here. So CalPERS and CalSTARS rate went down, so it can help the district to control our budget. So it went down about, so both rate went down, and it is about $500,000 to us. So there are some savings for us, about $500,000 annually.
Jackie, just
Yes.
really quick, we won't in the future have to make up the difference. Is that correct in terms of what we were, right? You're saying no?
No, well, we don't know yet, but then this is not something that we have to make it up. Usually what they do is they do their own actuary studies. And when they realize, we will have to collect more money, then they just charge us more. So that can be, but we don't know at this point. We don't have to make it up.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is the STARS, and it went down again. Okay, so this is kind of like the finer version of school districts result for this May revision. So as we went over, this is the funding level we were expecting to get, but instead, not only 2.3 was out of our picture, we received another 7.92 negative percentages. So its total, those two are about 10%. So it is exactly 10%, but then because of the order of which one goes first, I think you see a little bit of, when you see 2.31 plus 7.92 doesn't really equals to 10%, but it is 10% when we do another math. Okay, so what does this mean to Albany? So the revenue reduction is about 3.2 million that we are going to get less. But again, this is ongoing, meaning we are going to get less of 3.2 million this year, another 3.2 million, the same funding level, right? Less than what we expected to have. When our costs are increasing every year because of step and column, for example, and even the STARS rate went down, but it still goes up a little bit, as you can see. But our funding level will stay the same as we are getting for 2021, meaning negative 3.2 million all the way for 3 years. So that is his projection at this point. The good news is special ed, we are not getting less for special ed. In fact, we are getting a little more for special ed. That was his commitment for the special ed education, and this level stays the same as our January budget. So the subtotal for revenue is about 2.9 million, and STIRS and PERS savings about 500,000. The net reduction is about 2.3 million for us. So now this 2.3 million is the reduction that we would have to address before our June budget adoption. Okay, so the multi-year projection. So this is the slide that school services provided. So what this means is if the district does not have structural deficit, meaning we have, let's say, 10% of reserve, and the next year is going to drop to 4.2%, meaning there's going to be a drop of 5.8%. So for us, let's say we have a 10%, but it doesn't mean we are going to have 4.2% because we are already expecting structural deficit. We are already looking for about 6%, 5.8%. So 5.8% minus another 4.2% is what we are expecting to see. And there is another drop of 5.9% in 21-22, and there is another drop of about 6% in 2023. So this is a graph that if district does not have any structural deficit, this is how it will look. And for us, we will have to apply our reserve percentages and this additional drop of the percentages here. Okay, so I will say one of the another big area here is the defers. So we went through these defers during the Great Recession. So for state to keep the cash position. So it means to us, immediately it means to us is that our June apportionment, we are gonna get it in July 2020. And at the last board meeting, we went over this, that since we have about 10% reserve at this point, that we are able to meet our June payroll without the June payment to us. But the bigger problem is now, we are projecting that we are gonna get April, May, and June defers, and now we are gonna get in July 2021. So this coming June, which is next month, we were expecting about, let's say, 1.9 billion of defers. Next year around this time, we are going to expect bigger defers. So then our district will have to look at the borrowing options, because if we can just barely make this June payroll for 1 month, which is about 9 to 10%, this is no way that we can make it work without borrowing cash in order to pay the payroll expenditures.
Excuse me, Jackie. So the May revision indicated that the governor is already notifying districts that the April, May, and June 2021 payments will not be made until July 2021.
So this was announced that it is still in a projection, right? Also, he's expecting that, he's saying that we should expect this, but it's not approved yet in a state level. But more likely, we are expecting that this is coming to us once the state approves the budget, and this is with the package, and this is really coming to us. So at this point, I guess this is like warning that, this is the warning that you will have to be ready for this. Okay.
Thank you. That's very disturbing, because I don't know of many districts that will be able to make their payroll with that much deferral. That's a very severe deferral plan.
Right. So this is what they put up today. This is how I feel going through this presentation. Yes, this is where we are. I think it's not just CBO here, it's just all school districts where we are. Okay. So, when I was Kim, it was really good question because how can we survive? Well, how can we even manage our payroll when we have those 2-3 months of deferred? And it's interesting that state believes we can make it work. So here is the reasoning why they put this up there. So in 2007 and 8, the average school district reserve was about 8%. When you see the unified school district, 8%. When we had a Great Recession, everyone learned the lessons. So now, 18-19, the average reserve is showing over 17%. So state believes that we can make this work. We can maybe borrow for 1 month later on, but we can make it work. So this is the theory behind that, right? It's not the case for us, but this is why the state believes that it can be possible, right? It's one of the possibilities.
So Jackie, while the general state average is 17.26%, Albany is at 10%?
Right, about 9 or 10%, 9 point something percent.
Okay, thank you.
Right, but it's way more than what states required, which is 3%.
Yeah, that seems a little. So if they only require 3%, but they're basing this off the average, that's way higher than 3%.
Right.
That seems a little backwards. Like they're basing their reasoning off of the higher reserve, but they only require the 3%. So if everybody just had the required 3%, then then what would happen? Or I guess the better question would be, what happens to the districts that have the lower reserve? Because
they borrow money from the county, which is what some districts are already doing. So are you concerned that about, I guess I'd like to bring this back to what our situation is. I guess my first question is, are you concerned about making payroll without borrowing money at the end of this fiscal year?
So we can make this fiscal year for June because we have about 9%, little over 9% reserve. So we can make it work for this fiscal year because the deferral will be only 1 month. But for the next year, June 21, we don't have the reserve to make it work. So we will have to borrow.
And what percentage of reserve would you need in order to make 3 months?
So 1 month is about 9% or 9 to 10%.
You would need almost 30%.
Right, but I think what happened is when you look at this one here, I can maybe show you. So it looks like May and June will be the full defer, but the April will be less. So I'm thinking it could be maybe 2.5 months, not maybe for 3 months. So this is something that we will have to receive more information on. It's about a year ahead, so hopefully we get more information on.
I'd like to go back to what Trustee Doss said. If you can return to that previous slide. Yeah, thank you. I do think this is a point that deserves some attention. On one hand, we're always hearing about needing to show that we have a 3% reserve in the second year out. And certainly our bargaining units feel like that is the goal, that that's all you need, and that the remainder of the district's money should be spent on expenses, whereas what the Government Finance Officers Association recommends evidently is 17%. And I think that I have heard other organizations, accounting associations advise at least that, if not more. And that means that there's two different messages going out. And that makes it very difficult when we're trying to communicate with our community and with our bargaining units, because this idea that perhaps we should have much more in the bank, that we should have a much higher reserve to deal with unexpected situations like this, is very hard to promote, when times are good. And the only time that this surfaces is when a disaster strikes, like now. So I appreciate your point, Brian. We all the time are thinking and talking about this trying to find this 3%, when really the district's goal ought to be to have a reserve account of at least 17%.
So thank you, President Trute. Right, let's go to the next slide. So this is another again about reserve. So about this 17% versus 3%, what I would say is 3% is okay if we don't anticipate anything, any changes, if everything is ideal scenario. But this 17% is recommended because of something like this situation. We just never knew we will have this pandemic. We just never expected we will have another deferred at this time. So the state has been warning us to build your reserve for the rainy days. So those are really for emergencies, and the emergency situation really came to us, and that's where we are. So for the reserve, as you can see, we will have to really work on our reserves to protect our students, our teachers, and our communities. So that's where we really have to focus on for this situation like this. And here is what the slide is showing. The state required minimum is really a minimum 3%. Okay, and again, when I had this presentation this morning, I also got the same slide twice. And I think it's because they really wanted to want us to understand what this really means to us and be prepared for it. Because there was another slide for the deferrals, and this is another slide with the dollar amount that our local school agencies will have to prepare for 3-month deferrals in 2020-21.
Jackie?
Yes.
This only speaks though to having a reserve, a higher reserve. This does not even, in terms of our needing to either find money, tighten our belt, etc., to get a higher reserve. But this does not even speak to the fact that we, as you had said, need to reduce here in Albany our budget by 2.3 plus million. Is that correct? So
That is correct.
They're two different things. One is tightening our belt to have a higher reserve, and the other is we still have to go and cut over $2.3 million.
That is correct. That is correct. Thank you for that question. So this is all the heavy information to digest. I understand that. And next steps. Our next step will be a bumpy road ahead, of course, and the registrator will approve the budget by June 15th, or otherwise the state will have to suspend the payroll for them as well. So the governor will act on the budget by June 30th. And we will have the same timeline with them. And when they release another revision in August, we will get to have more of specific things, and hopefully we have a better news because the governor maybe will get some funding, hopefully get some funding from the federal. So that's where we are at this evening. Any other questions that I can take?
I had a clarification. You said there's going to be a net reduction of a little over 2.3 million. That's over how many? Is it 1 year or 3 years?
But this is just for this year,
Okay,
right?
thank you.
And it's going to be happening again next year because we have a flat funding at this point.
So each year we're gonna have to be cutting that amount.
Or we can say we can cut 2.3 million, and it's gonna be, if it's an ongoing reductions, then it will stay with us as well, right? So that
Okay.
there's a difference of one-time reduction and ongoing reduction. So this funding level is saying that we will have negative 2.3 or 3.2 less ongoing. And also this one shows that this is a reductions we will have to make ongoing.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So Jackie, thinking about the scenarios we had last time, I think it would be helpful for me to understand the bottom line of this proposal. Even though it might change, this seems like the worst case scenario for the next 3 years, because I feel like this is something the board has to begin grappling with right now. I mean, your scenarios from the last presentation, we already, with a 0% COLA for 2 years, and we're now talking about a 10% cut for 3 years.
Right.
That was going to require $1.7 million in cuts this coming year. And so, you know, I guess, you know, we've added some to that and taken some away, but I guess I'm feeling an enormous amount of urgency for us as a board and a district to have a clear sense of how we would even approach this worst case scenario. You know, personally, I'm not comfortable waiting more than another week until our next board meeting to begin discussing this. I don't think it makes sense for us to wait until August when we have a final picture. I mean, the scale of these just honestly since Thursday has made it hard to even sleep thinking about the scale of these reductions, assuming that we don't get more aid. So how do we begin to wrap our heads around this?
You know, thank you for that. Trustee Hinckley. I think one thing I maybe wasn't clear, now I think about it, is this is the reductions that we will have to make immediately for us to bring the budget in June and make 3% required minimum reserve just for this year.
The 2.3.
Yes, because this is happening already, that we cannot wait for the August because our budget deadline is still in June, that we will have to bring it to the county with the reductions. Or plan to have reductions at least, because the reduction will maybe happen throughout the year, meaning if the board accept or adopt some reductions at the next board meeting, that doesn't mean that there's going to be an immediate reduction. It might be something that we will have to monitor, or it's going to happen for phases, right?
So if we look at what you did before, I guess, for even our best case scenario last time was we had to make another 300,000 in reductions this year.
Right.
So now we're up to 2.6 million in the coming year.
Right.
That would have to, though, that spending reduction would have to happen starting July 1st in order for us to meet what you're describing.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. That is a big picture. Yes, that is correct.
Let me interject just for a moment. And Trustee Hinckley, I appreciate your understanding of the significance and a sense of urgency around this. In addition to some moves that we have to make by July, some of them we're precluded from making because we have some rules to some of the moves that we have to make. For example, if we would have to reduce staff, that requires, for example, most staff a 60-day notice. So if you were to start counting from, say, for example, June 1st, that means you can't really make any moves until August in terms of starting to really have the budget in action in terms of being reduced to keep us afloat. So those are things we have to consider. Staff and I have spent the last weekend responding how we might respond effectively to our new budget crisis and how best to keep the district afloat. And so at some point at our next meeting, we're going to share that with the board and ask the board to take some action regarding some recommendations we have to bring forward to mitigate our financial situation.
You mean at next Tuesday's board meeting, you'll have a reduction proposal for this amount?
Something similar, yes.
So there is nothing tonight that can get us started in terms of thinking about what the different possibilities are?
In terms of tonight in action, there's a number of possibilities, and Trustee President, as Vice President, Trustee Duran, I think I'm going to table that question till maybe towards the end of the board meeting, because that's a wonderful question, and that's when we start getting into the nitty-gritty about what are some possible scenarios. So thank you for that, if that's okay.
I would like to ask a question for CBO Kim. So you were just talking about the big picture, and it sounded like you were saying that the goal for the district is to simply try to end the next fiscal year. So that would be 2020, 2021 with a 3%. So it sounded like we're not looking at any of the year after that or the second year out, that our goal with the 2.3 or the 2.6 reduction is to simply stay afloat for the coming academic year. Did I hear that correctly, or do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So maybe this might be helpful. Let me put on my worksheet. So I think it was a little complicated. I thought that I didn't really went in details. So here is expenditure. What I'm going to do is we'll just hide a few. So when you look at here, you will see the reserve percentages, and this is where we are with all these assumptions that we are seeing today. So the reductions, if we say we are going to make, was it 3? Then you will see this. And I know Trustee Hinckley mentioned about another 700,000 that we were expecting to see was making this at least 3% for this year and next 2 years. Okay, so this is a lot, 2.3 plus another 700,000, right? So this is where we should be at to make this one 3% in next 2 years. So let's say, how are we going to do this at this point? Let's say immediately what we need to address is, for example, let's say we are going to cut reduce $1 million. Then we make at least 3% just to provide our budget in June to the county, and just to make qualified but not negative, because we need to make 3% at least for this 2021 year. Because for address this year county, if we give them the plan that how we are going to address it, they will work with us. But for us to make the 3%, in order to even give them the budget, we will have to make sure that we will have some reductions addressed immediately. And
can I just ask this,
sure.
Have you, none of this incorporates the likelihood that we'll have, that school could be significantly more expensive next fall if we are complying with public health guidelines, for example. None of that is incorporated in the expenditure side of that budget.
No.
Okay. I mean, I understand that why it wouldn't be yet, because that's, none of us know. I'm just clarifying.
Right.
And might I add to that, Trustee Hinckley, that we have a neighboring district that responded in a way that if this turns out to be, if this comes to fruition, that the district cannot afford to reopen school, and that extended learning is the only option in order for them to survive. So for some districts, this is very, very dire.
I think it's very, very dire for our district. I mean, I appreciate keeping it all in perspective, but I think it's important for, you know, our parent community and the public to understand how dire this situation is.
And for the 3% in the timeline, so, and there's no, they haven't said anything about there being an option for you know, waiving that requirement at this time based on what's happening, or extending the deadline. I mean, these are some huge cuts, and I just thinking right now, I don't know where those cuts will come from, but you know, having to make them and then make them so quickly, but then also make them so that they don't directly affect students, which is the goal, seems impossible. So, and to do it so rushed seems irresponsible.
Yeah, and Trustee Doss, under normal circumstances, those concepts would apply, but this is an emergency situation. And so under emergency situation, things are not responded in a normal way. And we don't have the luxury of time and planning. We have some time, but not the kind of time we typically have. And again, this pandemic, no one really saw it coming. It hit us. And so this is not only a national crisis, but a global crisis, as you know. And so things are not going to be the way they were and normal for a while.
Right, I totally agree with you, which is why, that's why I'm curious as to why they're requiring us to do things as normal, like to submit that on a normal timeline and to maintain that normal 3% minimum, because these aren't normal times. So I'm wondering why that has to be, you know, exactly. I mean, it's, you know, we're not making those decisions, but I'm just saying, I'm wondering why that hasn't been adjusted when everything else is different because of everything that's happening. I just would think that there would be some changes, or that there would be exceptions made, like everything else. Like, I mean, you mentioned that one school that said they won't even be able to afford to open. They'll have to do distance learning. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense to me, because if anything, when we were talking about, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but there's so many things wrong with that scenario. But that's not our district, so I'll stick to what we're doing here. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know if we have to have another meeting once those cuts are proposed, and then like have discussions around that. But and then, you know, taking as much time as we can to really think about it, because I just can't see how it's not going to directly affect students. It's just, there's not enough time to work out all the scenarios and think about the consequences of those actions. It's just not enough time to work it all out. But I mean, I know it's an emergency situation and we have to, but so I mean, I guess we're just gonna have to do things differently than we usually do. But I just don't know how we go about that with such a limited time frame.
Trustee Doss, I really appreciate you grappling with these kind of issues, because they're not easy issues, and you can see how tough they are. And I think before we had the luxury to fight all programs that might be subject to release because they would have an impact, adverse impact to our students and our kids and our community. Here, let me be crystal clear on one thing, because I don't want any of us to be delusional on this point. These cuts will have an impact to our students. And we don't want them to, but the reality is that they will. That's one. The other angle around the 3%, I think a perspective is that the 3% is what allows us to only contribute to a fraction of what we need to make payroll for all our employees. So whether they require the 3% or back up off of it, we need to have more than that in case we have to pay for a month or two meet payroll because we're not getting our funding on time from the state. And so these are scenarios that we have never, ever had to deal with in recent decades. So again, I appreciate you really struggling and grappling with the issue. And we've done that. We had a little more time over the weekend and yesterday and all night to come up with some possible scenario to mitigate this crisis that we're about to face.
Thank you, Superintendent Wells. I appreciate your courage in saying that there is no way that we can make cuts of this magnitude and not affect student learning. That's not why any of us are here. You guys are professional educators, and the board are elected members of our community whose goal is to improve education. And to be in the situation where we're in this position of having to make these cuts in order to have the district not go bankrupt is no one's ideal. But I'd like to go back, Jackie, if we could, to your worksheet.
Sure.
And just because it's these financial issues are complicated and hard to grasp, it seemed to me like you did two things. It seemed like you put in a $1 million reduction that we would have to institute right away in our June budget.
Mm-hmm.
And then that carried through for the next few years. And that would give us, I guess, a qualified budget for this coming year. And then we would continue to work with the county for making more cuts in order to achieve our 3% reserve in those future years. But then it seemed like you also made a huge cut just to show the reserve percentage. Did you do that right at the beginning, and so that you ended up with 3% in the second year out?
Right. So the reality is when we receive about 2.34, 2,000,003 less, ideally, we also need to make a reductions of the same amount, right? So meaning to, right? And then we had another 700,000 and then we were planning to reduce. So then we can have 3% in the first year and next 2 years. And I know we went over, if we don't do 700,000, if we do it earlier, then it could be, I think there was a scenario here that maybe I can bring this as well. So this was one of the scenarios, scenario 3, that we were gonna make 700,000 in 21-22, or we can do 300 in 2021, 250 in 21-22, which is less because we are acting, we are reducing this in earlier years. So they will also do 3% on the third year. So meaning, so I apply 2.3 million here, exactly the amount that we are getting less from the state. And then the earlier scenario showed 300,000, 2021, and another 250 will also make 3% in year 3. Right. So whenever we make the reductions earlier, we will have to cut less. I think that's right.
I think Jacob wanted to say something, he said in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I just want to make a suggestion. I suggest that when we make these cuts, we have some language that specifies which cuts will be brought back and in what order if we receive federal funding.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. Duly noted, and that's part of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Clark, for pointing that out. And also, thank you, Trustee Hinckley, for bringing our attention to the request to speak. Sometimes I don't see the chats or the raised hands right away. And I do want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask all of their questions and make all of their comments. We have another half an hour to discuss this. So we are not pressed for time. So please, board or directors.
Can I jump in, Kim?
Please do, yes.
Yeah, I know we're not voting on anything tonight, but I think Clementina and Sarah, and I'm sure all of us kind of feel this way, that I think we should at least start looking at some scenarios now. I mean, we still have a half an hour left, and if we're talking about trying to make decisions on Tuesday, I don't know if we are, but I think we should try to use this time as efficiently as possible to, you know, these cuts are going to be horrible, but there is going to have to be some cuts.
I agree.
Yeah.
President Tutain, if I could entertain that request to start it off, I appreciate it much.
Can I add an addendum to that request? Which is that I would love to start talking about them now. I also want to be careful that, you know, we don't have to pass a budget until the end of June. And I understand there are timelines about 60 days notice also in play, but the kind of cuts we're talking about and the discussions about how we're going to deliver education next year and how we're going to make up for the learning loss that happened this year, to me, are such important discussions that I don't want to make them under a sort of emergency mindset. I think it's really important that we have enough meetings, enough workshops, enough, you know, we have a budget advisory committee that we could at least have meet once to run scenarios by. I just want to be careful that we don't, you know, use this sense of panic that I am myself definitely experiencing to make a series of very quick decisions that we might look back and say, wow, I wish we had spent 8 hours making these decisions instead of an up or down vote at one meeting. I just really want to emphasize the importance of a process to make reductions of this scale. Like you said, this is going to impact students. I mean, there's no way to accomplish this without reducing staff that we know are necessary to help students learn. And I just really want to make sure that the board is, you know, fully processing those decisions. I think we have time to have much more discussion than just a little bit tonight and then a vote on Tuesday.
Given what you said, I feel that we really should be meeting every week, if not every day. No, not quite, because we need time to process and the community does too. But I think we really do need to meet every week so that we can get as many ideas or as in this, get as much involvement in terms of the community, if not giving us ideas, at least seeing the process and the thinking that's going on in terms of any potential reductions. So I definitely, I would like to recommend that the board meet every week until such time as we make some final decisions here about cuts, et cetera.
And I also, this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll be quiet for a little bit, but I also think it's important that while this is happening, there are also conversations about reopening next year. And there's a meeting, I think Thursday, to start that. I think those conversations need to be integrated so that the group that's discussing what school is going to look like next year is mindful of and informed about the discussions that are happening about staffing and budgeting and so forth. I just think there's a lot of really important decision work to be done, and we all signed up to do this hard work, and I think we can spend the next 6 weeks doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sarah, on that. I know that myself and I believe Clementina are both supposed to be in attendance of the meeting on Thursday. So if we take Clementina's suggestion and meet once a week, and I'm assuming that there's going to be opportunity to share all the information that we're discussing there so that it's collaborative, and so that everybody's on the same page as we're going through the process to make these decisions.
Just a point of clarification regarding the continuity of the budget and the superintendent reopening planning team. We have members in attendance on my team here and who will be here on a regular basis, and also participating in the planning team to reopen schools. So we will have some continuity there. But I want to, as a point of clarification, put on the table that under normal circumstances, we have the luxury of time. Here, we need to look at the timetable and the urgency. We either have an urgency or we don't. And we also need to look at the impact and consequences for making a decision later opposed to sooner, and the financial impact of that, so that the board is fully informed that if we do wait 6 weeks, which we can't afford to wait 6 weeks, what that might cost and a consequence of that in this current scenario. So I think all that information needs to be discussed, at least start the discussion tonight, because again, either we're in an urgent situation or we're not. And these are not normal times where we can really have a typical process and the luxury of really discussing, debating, having spirited debates and things of that sort. We have to look at some point, the bottom line and that impact. So each week we delay a decision to do something that's urgent, put the district in further financial challenges. And so it's important that we put those kind of issues on the table, because there are consequences that are adverse consequences to our district to delay doing some things. For example, this year, the governor and folks were saying, hey, this is a pandemic, unlike ever before. We have a shelter in place, and we want our employees to be paid and we can do this because they already budgeted for the rest of the year. Well, the rest of the year ends June 30th. And right now, we have folks at home doing no work and getting paid. We can, in theory, afford to do that for this fiscal year, but it ends June 30, and we can't afford to do that in the upcoming year, having employees at home with doing no work with pay. Those days are no longer available to anybody throughout the country and throughout the district. And so we have rules that if we are not going to pay people for non-work, which is the current trend of the country and the state, we have to abide by the rules by giving 60-day notice. And each delay will cost us, how much is that, CDO? For example, the calculations we came up with early, or as we were playing with scenarios, what it's costing the district to currently do that a month, about?
Right, $500,000. Right, almost $500,000. So I think, thank you, Dr. Wells, for
CBO Kim, let me finish making this point,
Sure.
and I appreciate that. And so it goes back to Trustee Doss' point, and that is, will this have an adverse impact to the classroom? Absolutely. The loss of $500,000 a month is going to have an adverse impact eventually to the classroom, and directly, and then eventually directly. So time is of the essence. We don't have that luxury under normal circumstances. We're talking about emergency situation, hence come emergency meeting tonight, and we have to move rapidly. And so maybe we might have to have a few more meetings so that we can have a lot of time to process. But I'm encouraging you, and wanted to be clear that under the current budget situation, we don't have the luxury of time that we all would want. That's what I just wanted to make clear.
So, President Trutain, do we need to have a formal motion to see if the board agrees to meet more frequently? And if necessary, more frequently? If, say, as opposed to once a week, we need to meet twice a week? Because we're, so.
What I would say, I mean, I really appreciate it. I love this board's willingness to put the work in order to do the best job that we possibly can. And I also hear our superintendent saying, we really don't have 6 weeks, at least to do some of this work, that we have some urgent decisions that are going to come to us sooner than that. So I think that we need to rely on, I think we need to let things unfold a little bit. We have the rest of this meeting, which includes a closed session tonight, and we have our scheduled meeting next Tuesday. And I think that we need to respond to the situation as it presents itself. At the end of our meeting next Tuesday, if we need to have a meeting the following Tuesday, let's do that. So let's just have meetings, even if it does happen that we have 2 meetings a week, let's do it as, as our superintendent needs to convey information, or needs us to weigh in or act on something. But I think that, I think that scheduling, I think that doing it just sort of pro forma, just like scheduling it now doesn't seem to me to be the most responsive way. I think that events will show us when we need to have our next meeting, and then we have it. When in an emergency situation like this, all we need is a 24-hour notice.
I feel like there's sort of discussion about hypotheticals or scenarios that I think staff are aware of, that the board is not, and deadlines. And I think it sounds like staff know what those events are already, and the deadlines. And if we don't have 6 weeks, how much time do we have? Maybe we could spend the rest of this meeting talking about what are the decisions you need us to make, and when do those need to be made? Because I, for one, I don't want to find out the day that I'm told to make them, that this is when you have to make it. It sounds like you already know that what those deadlines are. And if we don't have 6 weeks, how much do we have? And can we start talking tonight about these sort of situations that you're describing? It sounds like you have positions in mind that you are going to ask us to vote to eliminate or reduce. Is there a reason that we can't start having that conversation now? I guess I feel like we're sort of being told, wait, and then we'll tell you right when we need you to make the decision. And I don't really function well that way. I'd rather know in advance what are the parameters that we need to be functioning within to support the decisions you need us to make.
Well, I think that we had a point in this discussion when we were asking Jackie to talk about scenarios. And now we've sort of circled back and we're asking Jackie to present any scenarios that she might have with particular regard to timeline. So I'm
Can I jump in?
have her, yeah. So let's have any other board comment and then let's hand it back to Jackie.
Yeah, I'll keep it real brief. Thanks, Kim. Yeah, this is for Frank and Jackie. To just be completely honest, there's only so many areas that we can cut from, you know, so if we can actually get some scenarios where these cuts are going to come from, I mean, that's the reality, you know.
Sure. I think what we will have is, of course, classified positions, and of course, furthest from the classrooms. So the timeline is critical because if we make it for the next board meeting, which is May 26th, so then classified position will have 60 days notice, meaning it's going to be the end of July. So that is the timeline for classified. But if it goes to June, that means there's going to be the 60 days will begin after the board meeting in June. So our reduction will be less. And also, in order for me to bring the budget on time to the county, all the numbers has to be in by really the latest, because our board meeting for the budget adoption is June 22nd, meaning I will have to have everything before Monday, June 8th, for me to even run the numbers. So we don't have 6 weeks at this point. The governor released the budget on 14th, and we had a budget workshop today for the school districts that we get to know the exact percentages. However, the state hasn't released the formula yet. The state will release the formula next week, meaning that I will have more of the like dollar to dollar amount exactly. And I only have 2 weeks to submit the budget and prepare to the county. And also our 60-day notice will have to play into that tight budget timeline.
Jackie, I'd like to ask a question really quickly, and I think Superintendent, sorry, Frank, I'm just going to call you Frank. I think that you had talked about this earlier. Each month that we are keeping certain classified staff who aren't working, how much did you say we are spending for each month?
Well, it's gonna be depends, but it's more of just how am I gonna say like if we have let's say a lot of classified employees, it's gonna be 300,000 every month.
300,000 every month.
Every month, right? It's
right,
okay. Right, but it depends on positions. So then, right.
And are these not? Is the expectation that they also wouldn't be working in the next school year, or if we were to reopen?
So that plan has to be tied with our reopening the schools, right? When we reopen the schools, who are the essential, employees for our students learning? First of all, teachers, of course. And who are the next support for our students learning? So I think that's how we need to go farthest from the classroom, meaning we have to leave absolutely the classroom teachers, and the teachers, of course, support the students, and then we'll just have to go from that. So it's kind of like we are going to start with our classroom first, right?
I guess what I'm wondering is, if the first group of positions we would eliminate for the coming year are staff who aren't able to work when school is not being held, and that's why they're not working now. What's going to happen if we reopen schools physically and now we don't have any of those staff? Is this a decision that's motivated because we want to save the money because they're not working now, or does it also make sense even if we were to reopen schools physically?
I really appreciate that question, Trustee Hinckley. A lot of staff, if we were to lay off to meet the budget requirement so we can stay afloat. When school opens up, most staff would return on a classified side, but maybe not all staff, but the essential staff will return. We also have another side of the house, and that's the certificated side of the house, the teaching staff. We would have to free some positions and move some teachers who are not core classroom teachers, maybe into core classroom teacher positions for those certificated folks who have the credential to do so, as a way to mitigate the budget crisis and to have the least amount of adverse impact on the classroom. And so we would need a large percentage of those classified to come back, but I don't anticipate all of them would come back. And then the operative word is if they come through in Washington and support the states as the governors are requesting, a lot of this can be mitigated, not necessarily fixed, but mitigated. So again, we are in crisis situation.
I wanted to ask a couple of things. First, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Superintendent Wells, but my understanding is that because these are highly unusual circumstances, that the state, in some cases, may waive certain regulations that we have in place. I don't know. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that possibly notification dates, 60-day requirement, could possibly be an exception made?
They have not touched that, and there's no plan to touch it, because that's the way you protect employees. And it's a good plan because employees need time to transition. So that we don't anticipate will happen.
Okay. So I'm thinking of two possibilities. One of them, maybe just given what you said, is out of the realm. But I haven't heard any of your ideas yet, other than classified would go first and keeping the classroom intact to the degree possible. But do you also have some scenarios for I'm thinking of two specifically. One where we might look at where we spend so much money, which is in benefits, health benefits, and whether there could be an agreement that those could be cut back, scaled back 10%, so that would free up some money, so that then that could be used for staff in terms of maintaining staff, as opposed to possibility of having to raise class size as another option. And another thing that I'd just like to throw out there is maybe, I hope, well, maybe this doesn't exist, but I was hoping something like people volunteer. On the one hand, the governor is going to do a 10% cut in terms of employee salaries, those public workers for the state of California. And I was wondering if we could do a volunteer kind of program, nothing we could bind anybody to, but if staffs would be willing to cut their own salary by 5%, 10%, whatever, and at least a general agreement, and then people would have to determine what they could or could not do, so that everybody is feeling the pain and we're sharing it in the district as a district staff. For my part, it is so minimal, it's embarrassing to even say, but I get $200 a month from the school district, and I would be willing to just put that back into a district pot as a way of attempting to save money, and just putting it out there if across the board we could have staff, all staff make a cut of pay in order to help out the school district and save our district.
I have a quick question while you guys process everything that Trustee Duran spoke of there. My question is just about the essential workers. Where are we getting the list for the essential? Is that provided from the state saying these are the people that you have to have in place in order to open the schools? Or like, for example, like the people that are currently working and classified as essential workers, there's like a list. And if you're not on that list, then your business can't open. So do we have like that same type of list, or is that something that we need to discuss?
We don't have that list. It's kind of something that we know who the essential workers are, but we can provide I believe a one-sheeter. For example, you can't have school without teachers. And you got to have custodians because you have to have a sanitized place. You got to have food. Those things are essential. Things outside of the classroom, hence might be a great debate. For example, we have a number of teachers who are non-classroom teachers. One may argue those are not essential because schools could still function without them, but they do help mitigate challenges ranging from, for example, something we hold near and dear in our heart, the achievement gap, the kids who need additional help and support, those kinds of things. But without them, the school could still run and function, not at the optimal level. And that goes to an example of schools can be adversely and will be adversely impacted when we have a significantly reduced revenue. So the essential workers, Trustee Doss, as we were referring to as it relates to a school setting, are those I just mentioned, or some of those I just mentioned. Mental health services, those kinds of things.
Well, I think I 100%, Dr. Wells, I apologize if I cut you off there. I think obviously mental health is essential. It's even more essential now than maybe previously just because of the new challenges that everybody is facing. There might be some students who need those services now versus maybe they didn't need them before, but it's challenging times. I would also argue, Dr. Wells, that the achievement gap is an essential function that we need to focus on, because that is not only is that directly affecting students, but it's directly affecting our most vulnerable students. But I apologize. Like I said, Dr. Wells, I'm not here to one way or the other. I'm hoping that we can put together a list so that I'm a visual learner, right? So that we can look at that list, and I think that it will help us to determine these cuts. Like if we have, maybe we can even have discussions around this is essential. This is something we can't, cut. Versus. I mean, I'm not claiming to be the expert on it, but having that list and getting having everybody weigh in on it, I think would kind of help the process along. But Clementina raised a lot of points, and so I want to make sure that we get back to those. I just know that you guys might need a few moments to digest all of that. So I threw in my question real quick.
Thank you for referencing. I think we owe Vice President Duran a response to her question. And so if I can go back to Vice President Duran, we owe you a response. Are you about ready for that?
Yes.
I understand your thinking about all of us being in this together. I really, really do. I appreciate the symbolic gesture of $200, 10% of that. And I know what you meant by that. All the items you raised in a public entity, a municipality, are all negotiated items. And so those are items that can be discussed under negotiation and in a closed session that we're going to break to shortly, I'm sure. But I did want to give you a response, although it's not the response I know you want it because you would want a more complete response. If I were you, I would too, but I can give you my limitations in terms of, because those are negotiated items. That's one. So I just want to say we heard you, and that those are negotiated items, and some of which has to be taken up behind closed session because of under the auspices of negotiations.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Wells. We do not negotiate in public on this board, and thank you for pointing that out to us and reminding us to be careful about that. I did hear that Student Board Member Mala had a comment or question.
Yeah, I had a few comments. I know we're talking about like the 60-day period, but I think it's really important that we know that we're making these cuts now. It's important that district staff, all people associated with the district knows the impact that there's going to be, and there's not just a 60-day period, but now that we know this information, that it's given out, so there can be initial planning for individuals. And I think also when we faced budget cuts before, it's been really helpful to have input from different established groups in the district. Like the ATA has had proposals in the past. PTA has had comments, students have had comments, just not putting the burden on them, but reaching out and communicating what's happening. And then, especially since our meetings are not in public anymore, it can be more difficult to gather community input, but I think it's really important right now. And then my last thing was that I know about 6 months or a year ago, Trustee Hinckley brought up doing a system of working from scratch with the budget. And I don't know if there's time for that now, but I think that's working from the bottom up, if there's time, is something to think about.
Well, let me say this, Trustee Audrey, I appreciate that zero-based budgeting that Trustee Hinckley referenced months ago. I really, really like that ideal and concept. To me, that makes the most sense. I'm a big fan of that. Secondly, one of the things that staff did is that we looked at hours and hours of input that parents have given us over the years, and even including some input that BAC, and I think that's a good use of BAC weighing in on priorities. And we used all that input. It didn't fall by the wayside as a way to look at people's perspectives and what we consider were priorities, and how do we protect what we can protect, and realize that we can't hold on to some things that we held on to for so many years. Because again, these are unprecedented times. This is not anything they teach you in school, how to plan for. It was something that the country was not ready for. The economy is a clear indication of that. And it's just of crisis proportion, and we're living it. And we have to make tough decisions without the luxury of all that time in an ideal process. So we use the kind of infrastructure we have and the input that we received from these key groups that we kept on record, that we pulled out even recent as last year, to use as input to make some recommendations in about a week. And I know we're going to go into closed session, and in closed session, we're going to talk personnel a bit deeper, things that we can't do in open session because we have to adhere to certain rules and regulations and laws. But I always appreciate when students come and give this kind of insight. And so thank you for that.
I am wondering what the process is going forward for planning more meetings and scheduling those, because I do think that it is really necessary that we're having more than one meeting every 2 weeks. And I think there's at least some consensus that that is true for all of us. And so I'm wondering if that is something that we're all wanting to do. What is the process going forward? Because I know we have to end this meeting pretty soon.
I would ask that we allow closed session to go forward, and that we move the scheduling meeting discussion to our meeting on Tuesday the 26th. Dr. Wells, I heard something from you. What do you think of that?
I think that's the current schedule, and I think after our discussion around personnel matters in closed session, the board may be a bit more informed about our next board meeting, which we should have it be at the 26th or sooner. And so I think we should probably table that temporarily until after closed session. Perhaps.
Thank you.
Just get a clarification on the closed session, because we've talked before about the fact that any position reductions have to be made in public, that the board cannot vote to eliminate positions in closed session. So I just want to be clear that the plan is that next Tuesday, you're going to bring us a plan for positions that you would propose we reduce for the 2021 school year, not just temporary layoffs, but an actual getting close to that 2.3 million or somewhere a little higher or lower than that. Is that the plan?
We are required by law, more specifically the Brown Act and other statutes, to have a reduction of staff must be done in open session. You're correct there. This is not the case with our closed session item. It's going to be around personnel matters and potential impact, and speaking about specific personnel and rationales and things like that you can't do in open session. So this is a little different, but you are right about any reduction have to be done in public, and a vote has to be taken in public. No way around that. So you're correct.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure people watching don't get the sense that we're going to end this meeting and go behind closed doors and make a bunch of decisions about cuts out of the public eye.
Well, thank you for that clarification.
Can I also just ask, so you've spoken about the 60-day window or 60-day notice that's required, so that, you know, the sooner we make decisions, the more money we save. I understand that. Can you also clarify, since that's not being waived, we have already passed the deadline for making reductions in certificated staff under normal circumstances. Has that deadline changed from the March deadline that normally applies?
Not as of yet.
So does that mean we could not lay off any certificated staff for the coming year?
That deadline has come and gone. However, there is a trigger that might come into play after June 15th. And so we don't plan to lay off certificated staff. That's not part of the plan.
Is your plan, but also that doesn't necessarily mean we couldn't reduce the number of certificated positions, right? If we were, okay. So that could be part of your proposal on Tuesday, is to reduce the number of classified and certificated positions.
No, it would just be classified and non-representative.
On Tuesday. Okay.
Tuesday, yes.
Okay, so that seems like a good summary. And also, before we adjourn to closed session, I just wanted to thank everyone who's viewing this. It's not easy to watch, bad news breaking, and that's definitely what this is. So I appreciate the public's attention to this matter. Our public schools are very important. They're I think the fundamental building block of democracy is a good public school system. So I appreciate your engagement. I also wanted to remind us that we were dedicating and honoring the memory of Miss Caroline Clark, our teacher who passed yesterday. And with that, I want to adjourn us to adjourn open session and to convene closed session. Board members, if you can stay on the Zoom, I'll give us about 2 minutes to take a short break. And then I will open closed session with just our closed session, our folks that are invited to closed session. So we have to say goodbye to our student board members at this point. Okay. Open session is adjourned, and I will convene closed session.